For the record, my name is Henry Santana, at-large City Councilor. I am the Chair of the Boston City Council Committee on Public Safety and Criminal Justice. Today is August 12th, 2025, and it is 3:07 p.m. This hearing is being recorded. It is also being live-streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv and broadcasted on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and Files Channel 964. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.ps@boston.gov and will be made part of the record and available to all councilors. Public testimony will be taken at the end of this hearing. Individuals will be called on in the order in which they signed up, and they will have 2 minutes to testify. If you are interested in testifying in person, please add your name to the sign-up sheet near the entrance of the chamber. If you are looking to testify virtually, please email our Central Staff Liaison, Cora Montrond, at cora.montrond@boston.gov for the link, and your name will be added to the list. Today's hearing is on docket number 1356, message and order in accordance with the Ordinance on Surveillance, Oversight, and Information Sharing, Boston City Code Section 1663. I hereby transmit for your review and consideration the proposed surveillance use policy for the Roten monitoring camera system submitted in partnership with the Boston Housing Authority, BHA. Docket number 1357, message and order with the Ordinance on Surveillance, Oversight, and Information Sharing, Boston City Code Section 1663.3. I hereby transmit for your review the Boston Police Department's report on 3 social media analysis tools, the surveillance use policy questionnaire, and the relevant department policies that govern the use of these tools. This matter was sponsored by Mayor Michelle Wu and was referred to the committee on July 9th, 2025. Today, I am joined by my colleagues in order of arrival, Councilor Ed Flynn and Councilor Julia Mejia. We've also received letters of absence from Councilor Liz Braden from District 9, our Council President Rusi Louis-Jen, and Councilor Enrique Pepin from District 5. At this point, before I introduce today's panelists, I would like to give my colleagues an opportunity for brief opening remarks, starting with Councilor Flynn. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the administration team that is here. Thank you to the Boston Police Department as well for being here, for the important work that you do across the city. My comments will be brief. I'm going to focus mostly on the rodent control technology. That's certainly important to me. This is an issue that I've worked on for 8 years, pest control. I'm in the neighborhoods every day working with residents, working with city officials, working with neighborhood organizations on how we're able to effectively deal with the escalation of rats in our city. BHA Administrator, I was with you recently down at Mary Ellen McCormick in South Boston, and it's about working together. It's about listening to residents, supporting residents. I was at West Dedham Street over the weekend. I was in Cathedral, Berkeley Developments as well over the weekend. But we need to ensure that residents in public housing are treated with respect and dignity, and that includes making sure that the conditions are healthy and safe for them. We need to use advanced technology to kill rats in this city. Rats don't run Boston, the people do. And then on the second issue, I just want to acknowledge the 2 gentlemen that are here from the Boston Police Department. Both of them do an exceptional job working with the men and women of the Boston Police Department to try to keep our city safe, keep our residents safe. So I just want to acknowledge both of them for the important work they do, but also the men and women of the Boston Police Department as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Mejia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And just for So my understanding, there's two dockets, right?
Correct.
So I just want to make sure that I'm showing up for the right hearing. So two points here. I guess for me, I'm intrigued by the surveillance technology and how we use it for good. And so I'm curious, what are some of the potential risks that we can see, and questions that I'm sure we'll get from our BHA residents regarding the monitoring of rodents. Just curious what that's going to look like in terms of implementation. And most of my questions will be for docket 1357. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Mejia. I would like to now introduce today's first panel. With us, we have. Let's see. Okay. With us, we have Deputy Superintendent Gerald Cahill with the Boston Police Department. We have the Director of the Boston Regional Intelligence Center, BRIC, Ryan Walsh. We have Luke Hines, who is the Special Operations Manager. I have here with the Boston Police Department, but that's not correct. So but he is a Special Operations Manager, and we have Administrator Kenzie Bach, Administrator of the Boston Housing Authority. If you all, I'll hand it over to you all for your opening remarks and presentations. And if you can just introduce yourselves and put your name into the record, that would be great. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, councilors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today about these important additions to the department's analytic technology portfolio. My name is Ryan Walsh. I serve as the director of the Boston Regional Intelligence Center, part of the Bureau of Intelligence and Analysis within the police department. The BRIC's mission is to serve as the region's central point for the collection, synthesis, analysis, and dissemination of strategic and tactical intelligence to law enforcement, first responder, and private sector partners. It is a resource that supports the city's public safety responsibilities by analyzing, maintaining, and sharing information in a manner that protects our communities and the privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties of our citizens. In order to accomplish this mission, we maintain several analytic technology applications to enable our analysts and investigators to efficiently and accurately process information from a variety of sources. Increasingly, in recent years, we've seen an expansion of threatening content coming from social media-related applications on the internet. In each of the last 4 years, our analysts have processed more than 200 expressed or implied threat-related incidents, accounting for more than 50% of all the suspicious activity reports that we review each year. Last year, approximately 1/3 of all the threat-related reports reviewed by the BRIC had some sort of a social media component to the threat or the resulting investigation. To date, in 2025, 33% of threat-related reports reviewed by our team have had a social media component. These statistics indicate the increasing necessity of ensuring our team has access to advanced technology tools to effectively identify, analyze, and eventually mitigate these threats to our community. Increasingly, we're observing these threats coming from the online universe. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence under the Biden administration cited in a 2024 strategy document that, quote, as the open source environment continues to expand and evolve at breakneck speed, the ability to extract actionable insights from vast amounts of open source data will only increase in importance. In order to maintain public safety in this environment, law enforcement professionals must embrace new technologies and tradecraft to collect and evaluate open source data. An estimated 4.9 billion individuals use social media across the world. At the current trajectory, this number is expected to jump to approximately 5.85 billion users by 2027. Approximately 90% of the world's data has been created in the last 5 years alone. As this data content continues to grow at this speed, local law enforcement is increasingly challenged by the ability to proactively process and analyze the amount of data online that could potentially represent threats to our residents and infrastructure. At the same time as the use of social media platforms has expanded, recent academic reviews of the suspicious activity reporting indicators show the importance of accurately analyzing and investigating threat information to prevent mass violence. In December 2024, the Department of Homeland Security and FBI released an assessment and review of the National Suspicious Activity Reporting Initiative indicators conducted by academic researchers at the University of Maryland and the University of Nebraska. These are a formal set of behaviors that we use to assess whether an individual may be in the pre-operational planning stages prior to conducting an attack. The report reveals several significant findings regarding the effectiveness and presence of indicators in terrorist plots from 1990 to 2022. Most notably, indicators were present in 80% of terrorist plots and attacks. The research illustrates that the presence of these indicators strongly correlated with plot failure. When indicators were present, plots had over an 80% failure rate. The report also found that expressed or implied threats increased significantly in the most recent decade, attributed to developments in the digital communication technology sector and increased reporting from civilians. In addition to the counterterrorism space, we have increasingly seen the importance of analyzing and assessing social media content in criminal investigations. In July, BRIC analysts assisted with 2 homicide investigations, providing information to investigators by reviewing and connecting social media accounts, which in one case yielded additional identifying information, eventually resulting in an arrest. We also assisted in human trafficking investigations, where a juvenile victim reported receiving threats online via social media. Analysts were able to identify the suspects from their social media accounts, and then using that information, were able to assist detectives in getting search warrants and ultimately interviewing one of the involved parties. That case remains under investigation. Social media analysis has also aided in the recovery of missing persons, including a recently missing juvenile female who was able to be located out of state based on images from one of her social media accounts. Earlier this year, social media analysis aided in the location of a fugitive wanted for close to a year on several warrants for firearm violations, assault charges, and drug charges. The social media accounts identified were used to serve legal process and eventually locate the individual outside of the city. Additionally, social media analysis has aided in numerous sexual assault-related investigations over the past year, including identifying a suspect in one case who moved to Boston recently. Social media was used to find photos of the suspect's vehicle, and investigators were able to identify him. In another example, a victim of a sexual assault later reported receiving threats from an unknown number. Cell phone information and social media analysis was used to make a definitive connection between the sexual assault case and the threats case, leading to a resolution. In a third case involving a juvenile victim, analysts were able to locate photos and location information based on social media analysis, which ultimately resulted in an arrest. Based on the increasing prevalence of social media in counterterrorism and traditional criminal investigations, last fall, the department began an exigency-related trial of 3 social media analysis applications in an attempt to ensure that we were adequately addressing the heightened threat environment. Several factors led us to believe an exigent situation existed then and continues to exist now in this area. The 2025 Homeland Threat Assessment, released in January by the Department of Homeland Security, stated that over the next year, the terrorism threat environment in the homeland will remain high, particularly due to the confluence of factors, violent extremist responses to the domestic socio-political developments, especially the 2024 election cycle, and international events that domestic and foreign violent extremists likely will use to justify or encourage attacks in the homeland. The 2024 presidential election was conducted during one of the most complex, dynamic, and dangerous threat environments in U.S. history. Election officials across the country reported experiencing a range of threats and disruptive activity, including cyber attacks, bomb threats, swatting incidents, white powder envelope incidents, and mis, dis, and malinformation intended to disrupt election processes and deter individuals from voting. Additionally, throughout 2024 and into 2025, the BRIC has observed a high level of anti-Semitic rhetoric within racially and ethnically motivated violent extremist groups, whose members have posted anti-Semitic imagery, including memes and cartoons, on various social media and messaging apps, and continue to circulate this derogatory conspiracy theories about the Jewish population. These groups continue to employ foreign terrorist organizations' propaganda in their promotional material and have shared attack manuals that include foreign terrorist organizations' attack methodologies on how to use vehicles, knives, and explosives in planned attacks. In one Massachusetts example of concern in this area, in January 2025, an individual from Beverly, Massachusetts was arrested after law enforcement was notified of several threats posted to social media against the Jewish community and posts that encourage others to shoot individuals outside of local synagogues. A Nazi flag, ghost guns, 6 boxes of ammunition, and several pieces of firearms and firearm production materials were recovered from his residence following a search warrant. Additionally, Foreign terrorist organizations have recently expressed an interest and have disseminated propaganda calling for believers to target mass gatherings, iconic locations, and high-profile events within the United States. Current terrorist propaganda trends have been on a steadily increasing trajectory and rely on increasingly sophisticated digital platforms and social media applications to amplify their messaging and reach global audiences. The proliferation of artificial intelligence and encryption technologies have provided foreign terrorist organizations with new apparatuses for planning and executing accounts. The BRIC has seen an increase in the use of AI-generated graphics and videos disseminated by various designated foreign terrorist groups this year, including ISIS, Hamas, and Al-Qaeda. Most recently in July, the BRIC released an intelligence product documenting the increase in individuals engaging in targeted violence against elected and appointed government officials over the past year. Violent extremists consider these individuals easily accessible and high-value targets for their visibility within the community and positions of influence. Public officials are especially susceptible to attacks at their places of work, public events, and home residences due to the public nature of their schedules. The BRIC has seen a stark increase in the use of violent, threatening, and/or derogatory statements from malicious violent actors utilizing public platforms such as X, 4chan, and Gab, specifically targeting government personnel and elected officials. In order to best analyze and counter these trends, we identified 2 applications we believe would significantly improve our ability to counter these trends in the threat environment and improve the efficiency and effectiveness of our team at maintaining safety and security in the city. These tools were the Chorus Intelligence Suite and Site Intelligence's source feed and search feed applications. The Chorus Intelligence Suite consists of tools and capabilities for gathering data from open source data sources, coupled with capabilities to analyze that data. Chorus provides analysts the ability to locate an individual's publicly available social media profiles across multiple platforms simultaneously. The application provides significant efficiency gains for analysts, supporting investigations, enabling research across multiple platforms, which would otherwise take hours to complete. Chorus has greatly assisted social media analysis in over 30 sexual assault investigations. This has made a huge difference in recent years as the suspect and victim communication in these cases has increasingly taken place on social media applications. Chorus has allowed analysts to find accounts and phone number information that resulted in positive identification of suspects. Being able to search across multiple open source websites at once greatly cuts down on the time it would take to search each one individually. In one example, investigators only had a suspect's Snapchat name. Analysts were able to use Chorus to find additional account information, which included part of the suspect's real name, which then helped to further the investigation. The BRIC has also had success utilizing Site Intelligence's source feed and search feed applications. These are provided by the Site Intelligence Group to identify potential threats to public safety and gain situational awareness of developments within online forums frequently utilized by domestic violent extremists, foreign terrorist organizations, and those inspired by foreign terrorist organizations. The Site Search Feed application provides a search engine that enables users to search the source feed dataset for specific terms without having to directly access malicious forums. The source feed dataset is sourced from platforms and websites that are affiliated with terrorism and violent extremism. All data collected within the source feed system has been verified by a human site and expert analyst to contain violent rhetoric or that is associated with these extremist or terrorist groups, and online forums are not indiscriminately collected. BPD is currently subscribed to the subset of this content that is associated with foreign terrorist organizations and those inspired by them. Earlier this year, these applications aided the investigation of a threat of violence directed at state and local elected leadership who were scheduled to attend a major special event soon after the discovery of the threat. As a result of information gathered from this tool and other investigative efforts, the suspect was taken into custody, and shortly thereafter, a search warrant was conducted at their residence, which led to the recovery of thousands of rounds of ammunition, 3D printers, and numerous firearms and rifles. Additionally, the tool was used to aid in the investigation of a swatting threat directed towards a local, high-profile business CEO. The searches conducted within SearchFeed led to the identification of a previous doxing incident involving the suspect and 2 additional swatting calls connected to the suspect. This investigation remains ongoing. Finally, the BRIC was alerted by the site system of a post regarding an anti-Semitic threat to an employee of a local college. BRIC analysts were able to locate the original post via the search feed function within Site, and the BRIC was able to share this information with investigators from that local agency to ensure the safety and security of that campus and the individual involved. In closing, I want to be clear on a few points about this technology. Neither of these tools enables indiscriminate bulk data collection. They are used by a small group of highly trained professionals under close supervision and with the highest regard for privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties protections. The use of the tools are regularly reviewed by the BRIC supervisors and our privacy officer to ensure that it remains in compliance with our privacy policy and all other laws, regulations, and ordinances. We look forward to your questions and the discussion today regarding these critical technologies. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm gonna allow you all to go. You don't have it open, but I do want to make sure I left out Assistant Commissioner of ISD, John Uliak. Thank you for being here with us. I also want to just acknowledge that we've been joined by Councilor Fitzgerald from District 3, Councilor Weber from District 6, and Councilor Sharon Durkin from District 8. I'll turn it back over to you all.
Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, councilors. Thank you, Chair. Again, my name is Luke Hines. I'm a Special Projects Manager in the Mayor's Office under the Operations Cabinet, and I'm joined here today with my colleagues, BHA Administrator Kenzie Bach and ISD Assistant Commissioner John Ulrich, Assistant Commissioner of Environmental Services. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak today a little bit about the Boston Rodent Action Plan, or BRAP as we call it, and our request to add a new tool to identify rodent hotspots and measure the effectiveness of our mitigation efforts citywide. The technology we're proposing today, called the ExtraSense Motion Camera, is a rodent monitoring system that will help us enhance our work at the BHA sites and the new Boston Housing Authority site that we're going to be deploying this technology at, Ruth Barkley in the South End. The mission of the Boston Rodent Action Plan is to measurably reduce rodent activity across the city and to improve the quality of life for all Boston residents. It's our city coordinated and all of government strategy to address rodent issues by bringing together multiple departments, aligning on interventions, deploying innovative technologies to track and control rodent activity across the city, and address root causes of rats, most importantly, how trash is stored, handled, and collected. And our approach combines proactive mitigation, resident education, and community engagement, with technology playing a crucial role in helping us target efforts where they have the greatest impact. Over 2 years ago, the city partnered with Dr. Bobby Corrigan, one of the world's foremost experts on rodent control, to produce a comprehensive report on Boston's rodent challenges. This report, known as the Boston Rodent Action Plan, emerged, and many of his recommendations call for establishing a citywide leadership group to coordinate work across agencies, using data to guide rodent interventions in our investments in these strategies, deploying new technologies to monitor and control rodent populations, and attempting to make meaningful impacts to the trash collection system and infrastructure in our city. Capitalizing on his recommendations, we've deployed over 275 microshare motion sensors in bait boxes across various parks, alleys, BHA properties, and city facilities to measure rodent activity and guide where we should deploy our rodent mitigation strategies. We've also installed rodent-resistant barrels in parks and are working to improve our street little barrels citywide. We've partnered with BHA to upgrade trash receptacles at resident sites starting in Alston and Brighton as part of the participatory budget program. And we've also piloted new technologies in the North End with the installation of different sewer traps, and we have more planned to be deployed in the Back Bay, with surface traps being deployed in Chinatown in September. Today's proposal is to add another tool to our toolkit. It's a pilot with the ExtraSense technology company at the Ruth Barkley site, as I mentioned, and these AI-enhanced cameras will help us detect heat signatures and activate only when small animals, such as rodents, are present. The technology does not record audio, it does not collect personal identifiers or store footage of people. The system is designed to ignore and delete any video that is triggered by human activity. Footage of rodents is retained for no more than 30 days and is accessible to only a small group of people from the BRAP analytics team for the purposes of the rodent trend analysis. Our analytics team is partnered with our Do It team. And the goal of collecting this rodent data is to use sensors, and this new technology is to produce aggregated reports, such as heat maps showing where activity of hotspots are. This will help us target locations for mitigation, focus sanitation improvements, and measure whether our interventions are working successfully or not. The ExtraSense technology is already being used in New York City's health department, in the Bronx and Brooklyn, as well as different residential and park settings in the Massachusetts metro area. This pilot will complement our ongoing community engagement series, where we're gathering residents' feedback on trash collecting practices and sharing information on how proper storage and sanitation can reduce rodent activity. Through larger public meetings, such as the one that we're having this evening, smaller focus groups, and direct collaboration with other cities and stakeholders, BRAP continues to adopt and expand our efforts based on what works. In short, while the ExtraSense camera are a valuable new tool, they are part of much of a broader, data-driven, and community-centered approach to making Boston cleaner, healthier, and less hospitable to rats. Thank you all, and we're happy to answer any questions you have. And up on the screen, this is just an example of how the technology would work. So these are a couple of images. The images that you see on the right, as I mentioned, are the heat maps. So the cameras will detect rodent activity and then produce these reports, such as you see on the bottom. It also provides us locations where we should be deploying different traps or mitigation strategies. And then the data analysis on the left side are the reports on the times rodents were present, the frequency, and all of that information is being reviewed along with the other data that we mentioned with the sensors from our analytics team.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you to our panelists for being here. We're now going to turn it over to my colleagues for councilors' questions in order of arrival. We have quite a few, so we're going to do 4 minutes, and then we'll do a second round with this panel if we need to from any councilor. So, Councilor Flynn, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Walsh, I listened closely to your comments, and thank you for what your team is doing. You highlighted several cases where the police were able to solve crimes based on intelligence, technology. But you also use that same technology, intelligence, to find, say, an elderly person in need or someone that's sick that is lost their way. How frequently are you able to use that technology not to prevent crime or to solve crime, but really to help people? Is that part of the strategy too?
Certainly, I think, we try to use our technologies around, all the different sort of types of activity that the police department, is engaged in when there's a valid purpose for it. And I think tools such as these that we're talking about today have helped to find missing individuals. Tends to be younger individuals who are probably more active on social media and things like that. But I think we've certainly already had an example or two where that has assisted in a missing person investigation or things like that, for sure.
Does it assist with, say, like a missing child that is lost from his or her mother or father or guardian? Is that also part of it?
It certainly could if they were to, post openly on social media some content about themselves, or maybe have, other things that oftentimes we'll find, perhaps the parents aren't aware of, or other accounts that they may have, as we're looking for a missing juvenile or something like that.
And certainly with someone with, maybe dementia, an elderly person, that technology can also assist finding that person.
It could.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I want to go back. I want to focus briefly on pest control. Again, it's an issue I've worked on for 8 years. I also was part of the discussion on Dr. Corrigan's recommendations. I was able to make recommendations as well, and many of my recommendations were included. Not one of my main recommendations was having a standalone city department on pest control. But I do want to acknowledge, I was going to say Council Block, but Administrator Block, Ruth Barkley development is in the heart of my district, wonderful people. I know that pilot is going to be started there. You probably can't get a more diverse development than Ruth Barkley, so I'm glad we're doing it there. We've worked together for years on the challenges of the elevator system at Ruth Barkley. Tell me exactly what you're going to do with Ruth Barkley BHA to improve quality of life and public health issues as well.
Thank you so much, Councillor Flynn, and thank you for your advocacy for the Ruth Barkley residents. So a couple of things, as was mentioned by Luke, we're very excited about these sensors. We think that, Ruth Barkley it's the BHA's biggest development in the South End, which, is one of those priority action neighborhoods as part of the BRAP work, because we do see a lot of rat activity there. And so, I think it's a frustration to us sometimes that BHA sites are often sites for illegal dumping and other trash that comes in from outside. And sometimes that stigma then gets attached to our residents, which we think is really unfair. So it's one of the reasons that we're pursuing a bunch of different strategies. And we think these sensors are going to tell us a lot about sort of the exact micro spots in the site where things are happening. And I think that it will probably point to some of the places where we're experiencing illegal dumping, like, certain spots that are easier for people to pull off and do that at than others. So that's useful data for us. We actually already have sensors that the city has put in that have started up in the last 5 weeks that aren't part of this ordinance because they don't have any video component. They just sense when a rat goes into a box, but those are already helping us get some of the data. I think one of the things I'm most excited about that we've done recently is actually partnered with John and his team at ISD around Burrow RX, which is this, it's this method of killing rats using carbon monoxide in large burrows. And this has really helped us take out a bunch of burrows at Barkley, but also at West Broadway in your development, a bunch of other sites. We talked about when we were at Mary Ellen McCormick, one of the sites where we've been able to do that. And it's something that previously the ISD were the only folks who had the training to do it, and they helped our team learn how to do it, and we got the machines, and it's been so successful having one of those teams that we've actually just authorized having a second team, and so that they can really be all over the city. So that's a huge piece of it for us, is the work that we're doing on the rat burrows. But I think that this surveillance is just going to really help us be more targeted. I also do want to thank the councilors. I know that the council, has authorized money for participatory budgeting, and we at the BHA were really grateful to the residents of Boston for making this project in Alston Brighton. That's at our Commonwealth and Patricia White developments, one of the first participatory budgeting projects in the city. So it was mentioned as well in Luke's comments, but we're actually putting out an RFP to use those funds to buy new rat-proof like dumpster setups. And this is something where it's really going to help us to have the sensors, because if we can show that where we have those new dumpsters, and actually we also got a bunch of new dumpsters using BHA resources at Ruth Barkley, for instance, like if we can show, hey, when we have these, we don't see the same rat activity right around those dumpsters, it's going to help us with continuing to raise the funds that we need to do that across the landscape. Because a challenge we've had so far is that we put in like one really great new setup at Charlestown, and that was fantastic, but it's like one corral out of the 15 corrals that we have, and it cost us like $30,000 to set that system up, and we obviously don't have that right now to do everywhere. But this is something I totally agree with you, Councillor. It's like a #1 quality of life issue for us. And although it's not the subject of the hearing today, I do want to say that between the elevator project and a large ventilation project at Ruth Barkley, we've got $25 million of capital projects that are slated for Ruth Barkley this year, which is about what the BHA usually spends across its portfolio in capital work in a year. So it's a huge investment there. And I'm really excited that just last week we finally got the 100% design documents for, there's 8 of those elevators at Barkley that we've been waiting on the architectural designs in order to do the full modernizations, and so those have just gone out to bid. So it's a really exciting milestone for us.
Well, thank you, Administrator. And as you know, Ruth Barkley is very important to me, and all my BHA developments are, but I'm not giving up on my BHA development across my district. And we have significant, I know we're making progress, we have significant challenges with the elevator system at Ruth Barkley, but also at West Dedham Street, across some Villa Victoria as well. Elevators are operational elevators in BHA developments are critical. Mr. Chair, I don't want to take up any more time. I want to be respectful to my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. Excuse me. Thank you, Councilor Flynn. I think it's Mejia, right? Yeah. Councilor Mejia, you have the floor.
Chair. I'm curious, just so that we're all having the same conversation. The rodent situation, who's going to Brick is not going to be overseeing that, right? I just want to make sure, because if there's going to be any information sharing between Brick and the BHA, I don't know if I'm here for that. So just for the record, right?
No, all of the information related to the videos on the rat cameras is going to an analytics team would do it. And as Luke noted, these cameras are low to the ground. They're picking up rats, and then they actually have an added component that filters out, like figures out whether any activity is rodent or something else and cuts it if it's not rodent activity.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification, because I know my constituents are like, what is happening here? And then just to follow up, just for my own edification here, is it just video, is it audio? And let me just ask, just for safety's sake, is that if there is a crime that happens in and around that area, if there's any concerns, like how can, we're just wanting to maintain the integrity of what it is that you're doing, and what possibilities are there for there to be a breach in or overreach for that type of technology to then be shared? I just want to just note for the record, just all jokes aside, I'm really trying to understand that.
So I'll let Luke speak more to this, but it doesn't capture any audio, so the audio piece is not something. And then, do you want to?
And the video is just underground, right?
Yeah. Thank you, Counselor. And agree that it's definitely an important question. So as Administrator Bach mentioned, the camera is very low to the ground, roughly 2 feet above the ground. The camera doesn't have any audio, so it doesn't collect any sound. And it uses an AI technology to determine if the video that's captured is a small rodent. And if it's not a small rodent and doesn't detect that image, it deletes the footage after 15 minutes. Only footage of rodents is stored, and it's only stored for 30 days. And as Administrator Bach mentioned, that footage is reviewed by our analytics team in Do It.
Okay, great. I like the way you answer questions. I like that. So I just want to make sure there's no rat profiling here happening. Great. Okay, so I'm moving on.
Well, there is rat profiling happening.
I know.
Only
All right,
rats.
I know. Just lighten it up here a little bit. But let me just go into some of the more, I lined you up, and I'm going to go to the harder questions for you all here. And this is in regards to, and maybe we might potentially have a different hearing around this, but I'm just curious. This is about Flock. Can we talk a little bit about that? After the 90-day Flock trial, what is the decision process making, in the timeline for continuing or discontinuing the use? Who signs off? What metrics will you rely on? And how will the City Council be involved before any extension or expansion?
So our understanding is today's hearing is on the social media analysis tools.
I know, but I'm just trying to throw that in while I'm here.
I would say,
We'll remain.
All right. Okay, I'll remain focused. Okay, fine. So let's talk about social media.
There will be opportunities, Councilor Mejia.
Yeah, if not, I'll just,
I would say we're happy to answer
yeah,
questions.
I'm
outside
very
this
intrigued
forum.
about Flock right now, but let me just go back to the social media. Beyond the listed tools, does BPD conduct social media monitoring through traditional means? And are personal phones strictly prohibited for this purpose? Is there a written policy covering the non-tool surveillance?
So I think it depends on kind of like the precise definition of social media monitoring. I will say definitively personal phones are not used. We only use approved department equipment for all of our work, frankly, so that's a hard no for sure. I would say we do use, just general social media, publicly available social media access that any, person would have on the different applications in our work in investigative support and public safety purposes.
Yeah, there was one more question. In regards to social media, I know you referenced a few very specific examples of how successful you've been. I didn't hear any around El Punto. Y'all look at Luke knows. What you know about El Punto? I see.
Street takeover activity?
Yes.
Is how we would refer to it?
Yes. Mm-hmm. There's been, social media activity there, and I'm just curious, that is something that is more hyper-local here in the city of Boston, not Massachusetts, but in Boston in particular. So I'm just curious kind of what and how you've used that intel.
Certainly, I would say we are very aware of the concerns around street takeovers and the violent crimes, including, shootings and homicides that have happened at some of those incidents, fortunately, most recently outside of the city. But we are trying to be as proactive as possible, helping our officers deploy to the right locations based on what we're able to glean from publicly available social media, that is being posted by groups that conduct this type of activity.
And I heard my time went quickly, so I'll come back for a second round. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Fitzgerald, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Around the social media analysis tools, aside from the social networks like Facebook, Instagram, and all the ones that are free to monitor, as people rightfully are putting that stuff out there. So, right, there's nothing. But on these, are there other, and I'm not in any, so I apologize, but on these online forums or other things where people might have posting boards or message boards or all that, I only understand them to be in college football, but I know that other people talk about other issues. Are they accessible by the public, those forums, or is that like you know what I mean? When someone has one of those boards, you have to be invited in or something like that, and if so, yeah, I don't want to give away any secrets, but like, what is in the sake of transparency, do you have to make your way into it and then sort of assess what's going on to recognize threats?
So there's a variety of kind of, depending on the tool, you can sort of apply to join a closed group. You can be invited in some cases. There's sort of, it's unfortunately is very specific to each kind of individual application.
Gotcha.
I will say that the Chorus application that we're kind of talking about today is strictly at that sort of fully publicly available level. It hits across a number of different applications, but really at that sort of publicly available. If you went to each site, you'd be able to glean the same information. That tool helps us to gain significant efficiency, in doing that across those sites. The site tools that we're talking about today do start to kind of get into this area of potentially closed groups, and we worked with the folks from site to kind of understand their data process, and it's very similar to what our analysts do on a regular basis as well, where the only content that they collect when they are able to access a closed group, usually by being invited in or by accessing a larger publicly available group, but someone has some sort of control over it. They only collect content that is threatening in nature or related to a foreign terrorist organization or a domestic violent extremist type activity.
Yeah, thank you. As you talk about facing the more public-facing ones, earlier we had a hearing about the impacts of social media on the youth. And so if we are successful in our first hearing of not getting them addicted to social media, will that impact you guys in the long run? But I think it's something you guys would probably welcome. Right?
I certainly hope so.
Yeah, no, that's great. I was just thinking about the dichotomy of the two hearings today and how one would affect the other. As for the rat cameras, this is only how many? Is this just happening in the south? This is the first pilot. I apologize, right? If I might understand that correctly, Luke.
Yeah, you're right, Councilor. Ruth Barkley is the only site that we're going to be deploying the ExtraSense technology right now, but and John can speak a little bit more to this, but we have 275 microshare sensors deployed in bait boxes, which isn't a camera, but it detects rodent activity in the same way once a rat enters the bait box. Those are across sites throughout the city.
BHA sites only.
BHA, parks, alleys in the back bay, all over the place.
So
Those aren't subject, sorry. But those aren't the subject of this hearing because since they don't have a camera.
yeah, no, I was just wondering how many of those ones would be in District 3 of those monitoring. But if it's at all, no need to have that information now. Okay, thank you. No, that's actually all the questions I have, Chair. I appreciate it, and thank you, panel.
And Councilor, we can follow up afterwards and get you a list of all the sites in District 3 if that'd be helpful for you.
Yeah, just curious. Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Yep.
Thank you, Councilor Fitzgerald. Councilor Weber, you have the floor.
Thank you. Okay, so I guess, is it Director Walsh? I don't know.
Ryan is fine.
Okay. Can you just explain what BPD's obligations are under the ordinance in terms of new technologies, and when they're supposed to report or seek approval acquiring them, and what's your understanding?
I would say I'm not an expert on the ordinance by any stretch. We have a great team of from the Office of our Legal Advisor that provides us advice on a best way to adhere to the ordinance. My understanding is that, when we want to acquire new technology under sort of an exigent circumstance that we think is, really critical to the safety of the residents, that we can engage with that technology and then kind of notify the council, after a period of time, depending on if we feel that's successful or not, and if we want to kind of continue with that technology over a long-term period.
Okay, and I mean, I think initially it's supposed to work like, Mr. Hines laid out, like we would just ask for, let us know what the technology is and we can approve it. That's sort of like I think the preferred way. Then if there's exigent circumstances, you're supposed to, I think within 30 days, let us know that you are acquiring, it's supposed to be within 30 days of the expiration of the exigent circumstances, but if that hasn't expired, you're still supposed to tell us that you're going to need an extension of the 30 days. Are you aware of that?
I was not aware of that last piece, but...
Okay. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's kind of hard to make sense of everything, but, it says that the department or agency must notify the council, if the department or agency is unable to meet the 30-day timeline to submit a technology report, technology impact report, and if necessary, the technology-specific surveillance use policy to the city council, the department or agency must notify the council in writing requesting to extend the period. So did that happen here?
So we've issued the letter to the council before this hearing. I'm not 100% sure on exactly what the timeline was, to be honest.
Well, if it's October, you're using the social media tools, right, in October 2024 into November. So within 30 days of that, my reading is we're supposed to get at least a request for an extension.
I would say I apologize if we did not meet the timeline. We definitely will strive to do that in the future for sure. But we're here today to kind of take your questions for sure.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm just because I think this is relevant when we're looking at whether to approve the technology. The other thing, so for these tangles and source feed and chorus, again, these are publicly accessible, information that you're scanning all at once. Is that right?
So I would say to kind of be specific, so Tangles was a third technology that we did conduct a short trial with. We decided not to move forward with a procurement of that application for a number of reasons. But both Tangles and Chorus, I would say, are completely accessing, fully what we consider fully public domain information. The site tools go a little bit beyond that.
Okay. And just so then who makes the determination that there's an exigent circumstance?
I would say the police commissioner.
The commissioner, okay. So just looking at the definition of exigent circumstances, I need my reading glasses, it says that they exist when there's a good faith and reasonable belief that an emergency involving danger of death, physical injury, or significant property damage or loss, similar to those that would render it impracticable to obtain a warrant. Do you understand? Maybe you just this is not outside of your area of expertise, but it was the nature of the threats around the election. Did that make it? The way I read this is, not only does it have to create harm, like there might be somebody who, through these chats, goes and does something violent, but is there an analysis being done? Does that make it impossible or impracticable to obtain a warrant?
I think in some cases, yes, it would. I do think, a large portion of the exigency started at the election time period. We were very concerned about the possibility of attacks that we might be able to get advanced, warning of on social media around that time in particular. And since we have been using the tools, I feel very confident in saying that the attacks have prevented the loss of, the access to the tools has allowed us to investigate threats that have prevented the loss of life.
Okay, just one quick follow-up, with your permission. Sorry, Councilor Durkin. So just can you, I'm trying to figure out the order here. Is there do we have a tool, and then, do we have these tools in place before the election, and then didn't use them until the identification of an exigent circumstance? Or is there an exigent circumstance and then or when I say we, Boston Police Department, uses the funds to get it? So I'm just trying to figure out which comes first, the chicken or the exigent circumstances.
I would say that the exigent circumstance we felt that the exigent circumstances necessitated the acquisition of these tools. I would say though that the commissioner is constantly looking to us to kind of assess that threat environment for him, and then he is best able to determine what are the technologies and tools that the department needs to counter that environment. And it reached a level last fall that we were really not comfortable that we had adequate capabilities in place, and I think we continue in that place, unfortunately, through the year so far this year.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm just, my comment is I'm a little concerned that the setup here is that the exigent circumstances exist for all time. I don't think these are designed to never end. But
well, I guess I would say that we did, it was delayed. I will, admit to that, unfortunately. But we have submitted a letter, and we're here at this hearing now. So I think that's kind of our current stance.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Weber. We're going to go to Councilor Durkin, but we're going to do a second round for those who need a second round with this panel. Councilor Durkin, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Chair Santana. So, I think, for starters, this document, this ordinance, is only 19 pages long. So I think anyone who works in this space and is, poised to defend the BPD's work before the City Council should have read and be an expert on that. And that's with love, and that's with a lot of support that I've given the police department over the years I've been on the council, but I just that rubbed me a little bit the wrong way. And particularly, the third section of this, it's very clear that you both need to write to us within 30 days. And then after those 30 days, there's a surveillance technology report, impact report that should exist. And if they're not able to create that within 30 days, then the commissioner sends something for an extension. And then I wasn't here when this ordinance was created, but I think if my entire job was facilitating community trust between the BRIC and the police department, I think that it's right for any city councilor to say that it's incredibly important that you have both read this document. Because to do the best job for the commissioner, which I believe is one of the best commissioners in the entire country, the staff needs to know what this ordinance says. And so I think that's really important. So before I was sort of getting ready for this hearing, my first question was, does the ordinance need to be amended to get a real-time letter notification when exigent circumstances are proclaimed? And the ordinance answers my own question. It calls for all of that. It calls for a letter. It calls for a letter after. It calls for a report. And then I guess my question is, exigent circumstances are 30 days, or have we been using these technologies since October 2024?
So I guess just to clarify, I'll speak for myself and the deputy. We have read the ordinance in full. I feel like I have a good working understanding of the ordinance. I will say I am not a legal expert on all of the details of the ordinance. We have fortunately a great section of the department that is that for us. Our operational responsibilities, do require us to rely on others to do some of those more detailed analyses for us from that perspective. I would say that, yes, we have been using the tools since the exigency was sort of deemed exigent by the commissioner last fall.
So basically, we didn't get a letter when it was started. We didn't get a letter, or we didn't get a report afterwards. So are we planning to create a report like the ordinance calls for, a surveillance technology impact report? Has that been created?
I believe that came over with the letter.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, and I guess on my end, I just want to make sure that like, I personally don't know the difference between source feed and site feed and tangles and chorus. And I don't know enough to know whether there are bias within those platforms of what kind of information they're sort of gathering. But it does seem like every 4 years and every single election, there would be an exigent circumstance or, or could, so it kind of feels like the city could just, or the BPD and the BREC could come before us every election to ask for that ability, if it's related to the election.
I guess what I'd say on the first part of the question is that, these tools are all used by, well-trained human analysts who are trained in countering those intrinsic biases. And so we certainly recognize that any technology tool that we use, could inject bias into our analysis. And so we're definitely, sensitive to that and have a heightened kind of awareness of that, particularly around open source, social media content for sure.
And this isn't a criticism of BPD or the BREC. It's literally a criticism of the fact that we've seen so many technologies that have intrinsic bias. And so in choosing what technology BPD or BREC is going to use, I mean, that's something that, and that's why this whole ordinance was created, so that the city council could review what technology was being used, so that the city could help make a good, so that the governing body of the city could help make decisions in that respect. Okay, I think that's all I have, and I know I'm coming in hot, but it is just surprising it's been like almost an entire year. So I feel like when you read through the ordinance, I mean, there's 30 days, 30 days, 30 days. It's like supposed to be that basically the public has access to the technologies and information about the way the technologies are being used if it's not approved like within 30 days. So I think that the reporting that has happened there, I mean, that is how I found out about that. And as a city councilor, I don't think it's appropriate that I'm finding out from reporting that we haven't approved something that is being used. And I'll just say thank you to the BRAP team and thank you to the RAT team. I know we only had 4 minutes, so I didn't have time to talk about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Durkin. We're doing a second round now, so if you have time, if you have other questions, we'll be here. Councilor Mejia, you have the floor.
Thank you. And just for clarification, I believe this is the ordinance that was established by Councilor Councilor Arroyo, Janey, and then Michelle Wu, Mayor, former, right? This is the ordinance that we're talking about, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, okay. And then also in the public hearing notice, it says here, social media analysis, the surveillance use policy, and the relevant, so it's not just about social media. We are here to talk about oversight in general, right? So I'm not just regulated to social media. I see you looking at the chair. Did that change from the moment that this was noticed and the moment that you sat down, just so that I'm clear? Because
Today we're talking, it's a social media analysis tool, which is a technology that they use, and the surveillance use policy questionnaire.
Okay, so I can ask questions that are related to surveillance too, not just regulated to social media. Just so that I'm clear, because
Yes, but we're not focusing on any specific other technology besides the two that we're discussing today.
And is that intentional? Because the hearing order says surveillance use policy, and if there's surveillance, other tools being used to surveil people.
You're talking about the first ordinance, the one with the monitoring of the rats?
No, I'm talking about other tools that we're using outside of from social media.
Yeah, surveillance use policy.
So I can talk about other things, right? Not just social media. Because I tried to ask questions about other tools and I was redirected. So I just want to make sure that if I read the hearing order correctly, it says surveillance use policy, but when I went to ask questions about other tools, I was redirected and said, no, this is just about social media. So I just want to be clear so that I am utilizing my time
Absolutely, and we can reset your
as
time.
you see fit.
Yeah, so just because, I mean, it does say surveillance use policy, but the two technologies that we're talking about today is the one with the rat rodent and the one with social media.
So, okay, so then we're, okay.
So like any of the other things like ShotSpotter or any of the other technologies, there will be a different hearing for those.
Okay. All right, so So then I'm just curious, the tools that are described as focused on anti-terrorism and threat identification, in practice, how often are they used for other crimes? For example, larceny, theft, drugs, gang activity versus anti-terrorism?
So I would say that most of our tools are used to counter kind of both types of criminal activity that we see. There are, like the source and search feed tool are much more directly focused in the counterterrorism space. So I would say it has been infrequent when we've seen, sort of crossover there, I would say.
So can you just help me understand, like just give me some numbers so that people who, just like 30%, 40%, just break it down in numbers.
Oh, I would say the source feed and search feed tools are probably like 95% in the sort of counterterrorism space. Chorus is a tool that is able to probably, it's probably like 65% traditional criminal activity, and then maybe 35% or so counterterrorism, but heavily dependent on kind of the investigative mix of requests that we're receiving from our investigators and our own investigations that are going on.
Okay. I believe it was also shared in the report that Sites and Chorus are BRIC only. Is that true?
Correct. Currently, they're used by BRIC personnel.
And do other units still search public information without those tools?
Yes, I believe so.
And what are they using?
I'm not aware of any other like paid tools that are in use in the department.
Okay. So what policies governs those processes? Like, how do you guys go about making your decisions?
So I would say our privacy policy is kind of the overarching policy that we definitely look to a lot in this area when we're determining different types of data that we're going to look at and analyze as the primary policy, and then general departmental policies and city ordinances such as the Trust Act and things like that for other guidance on data management practices.
Okay. Yesterday, Julie Bernstein from Digital Forth shared that source feeds and search feed were first used under the extinction circumstances. And I'm going to ask the question, but I also want you to define for our audience what extingent means, because, we're throwing around words, and I want to make sure that people understand what that looks like for you all. And in late 2020, and then extended without council consultation, so that happened without our approval. Can you walk us through that timeline, given that BPD now has said that Tango is being used under extingent circumstances? So what processes will prevent that from repeating again?
So as far as the definition, I think we are perfectly happy with the definition that's in the ordinance that Councilor Weber read a few minutes ago.
But I'd like to hear you say it.
I'll admit I don't think I have it in my notes here, to be honest. Let me see, sorry. No, I'm sorry. I don't have a copy of the ordinance. So we would go with the definition that's in the ordinance.
Okay. Well, because you're going to be held accountable to it, so I'm just saying, you better know it better than Councilor Weber knows it. Okay, but so then, if you don't mind, can you just kind of walk me through the timeline?
So I would say we believe the kind of the exigency built, through the year last year, and then really kind of peaked as we headed into the election season. We felt that we were really kind of not comfortable with our ability to analyze and review content, particularly in the open source social media space, efficiently and effectively as we thought we would need to be able to counter threats, around that time frame. So that kind of built through the early fall. We started the trials kind of in the October timeframe leading into the election. Kind of as the election peaked in the immediate aftermath of the election, we thought, could be a time of, definitely increased threat. I think, unfortunately, we saw, following the election, kind of continued developments in the threat environment that significantly concerned us and concerned the commissioner, that we felt necessitated our continued use of the tools.
Thank you. And my last question, because I know I probably won't get a third round here, but I'm just curious if with AI, there's been a lot of doctored up videos that have surfaced on social media. And I'm just curious, because people don't trust government, people don't trust, period. I'm just curious, kind of how are you really looking through things with a lens of like, is it true? Like, is it not? Like, I'm just so curious because right now people are out here believing all types of things that are not true. And so, I'm just curious, especially because people just have a bad habit of utilizing tools to cause harm. So how are you reconciling with that?
I'll take this one, Ryan. Give his voice back a little bit. So that's why we have detectives, physical people that will vet every thing that comes into the office to make sure that it is true. So we will assign it to a detective that will go and look at what was published online, and then if during the year or someone, or even a different part of the state, will actually go out and talk to these people to make sure this is a viable threat.
I will say we're definitely becoming more and more concerned about AI generated content and sort of our ability to recognize that. It's something that the analysts we're discussing frequently in the office for sure, making sure frankly that we have the right tools to make sure we can do that. It's definitely one of the first things when we get notified of a threat on social media. We're often trying to determine, is this actually original content, created by the poster? Is it someone reposting things? We often see that, particularly unfortunately with school threats. We see a lot of reposting of different content, and so that can, unfortunately make the investigative process a lot more challenging to kind of narrow it back to that original person who's posting it. And I think, frankly, artificial intelligence is just going to make that even more difficult.
Yeah, and my time was up.
Yeah, do you have one?
I have a few more, but I want to respect.
Let me go to my colleagues and then I'll come back to you, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Weber?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I don't envy the police department. I mean, this is, we just had a hearing on social media. People are posting all kinds of outrageous stuff, and, I'm sure 99% of it just leads to nothing. But of course, we don't want to overlook that person who's really intent on causing harm. So I don't want to, undersell that important work. But just in terms of the ordinance and following the ordinance, so do the exigent circumstances, does it continue to exist today that allowed the use of these technologies when you started last year?
I think our assessment is yes.
Okay. And then I guess, I know you're here to talk about the ordinance, and obviously we're all going to work together to make sure, we're keeping people safe, but and at the same time, we're following the ordinance. But so do you feel like in this last year that the police department has complied with the ordinance?
I would say maybe not the letter of the ordinance law, but that's why we're here, to make sure in the future that we do completely comply with it and make sure that things are done in a timely manner.
Okay. I would say, like, nobody can be half pregnant. If either you're following it or not, and I agree, you haven't made it there to comply with it. So, I mean, I think, in terms of what's going on in DC, we really want to have faith in our police department, and one of the things that the police department can do is just, is really to comply with this thing, because it'll help us. I guess in terms of, I don't know, I know we're not talking about UASI, but you mentioned violent domestic extremism. Just to highlight the UASI application that's apparently getting filed by someone, has taken that out as a priority. Will we still be using these tools to monitor domestic violent extremism if that grant is filed?
Most definitely.
Application. Okay. And just, I'm sure I'm running out of time. Just to shift gears a little bit for BHA, you said that the technology will not pick up human activity or can you just add I've been asked about this. Can you just give me a little more information that I can pass on other than take our word for it?
Sure, absolutely. And I'll go again to Luke in a second. But just to be clear, so there's two different things. not the subject of the ordinance, but already on site at Mildred Haley, for example, are these sensors inside of bait boxes. Those just pick up when a rat goes into the bait box. Those are obviously not picking up humans because they don't get into the bait boxes. The reason why we're interested in this other technology is that, as we all know, unfortunately, we don't get all the rats into the bait boxes, right? So we're trying to get a more holistic sense of the rat penetration at the sites. So the idea of this other technology is that it is a camera system. It operates at that sort of 2-foot level. And so because of that, it might initially pick up a human like foot or something, right? For instance. So then, and I'll pass it to Luke, there's a kind of backstop there that's the video that's continuously running. It's analyzing it for basically that, like, does this look like a small furry rodent? Yes or no, like sort of question. And that affects how long it even stores the tape in the first place. So things that it's like, oh, these are rats, it stores for up to 30 days. Even the rats, we don't keep longer than 30 days. But anything that doesn't match that kind of small rodent gets deleted, I think you said in 15 minutes, right? Something.
Yeah, in 15 minutes. And I'm not sure if the video is still up there, but we did have an example to show you what the camera footage would look like. I would just say, building off of Administrator Bach's comments, one of the reasons why we're deploying these different sensors and also this new technology at Ruth Barkley is because collecting data on rodent trends and hotspots is a key component of the Boston Rodent Action Plan. We're deploying different interventions and mitigation strategies, and we're thankful for the council for giving us increased funding this year to help us put forward some of those technologies. But we're using this sensors to kind of deploy our different strategies and then see if the data trends trend down to better understand if our mitigation works. And then we'll be making long-term investments using those data to kind of guide our strategies. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, maybe after, if it's implemented, then to show us where it deletes things, or I don't know. People are skeptical, but I hear you, and even if it's 2 feet high, so the harm may be really negligible or de minimis or whatever.
Yeah, and we're happy to. I mean, honestly, we're doing it at Barkley first because it's a new technology for us. So I think we're happy to, if you want to look at it once it's up. And we haven't turned it on yet because we've been waiting for this. So I think turning it on and then showing you guys, oh, this is the type of thing it deletes in 15 minutes, and this is the type of thing that holds on for 30. We're happy to do. It's not like we're instantly deploying it across the whole city. We're doing it in just one location first.
Okay, yeah, just a comment. Going back to BPD, I think in the past, I think my staff found at least one letter notifying the city council of new technology. So I know you guys know how to do this. So let's start doing that again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Weber. Councilor Durkin, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. So I think that what Councilor Weber said is just my feeling, is that I know that this requires a lot of staff time to put together. I know that there's a lot going on, but I do think it's really important that City Council be notified, and that honestly, if there is something within the ordinance that you guys cannot accomplish within the amount of time, we can look at the ordinance again. I just think it's a really important point of community trust. It's partly why the surveillance ordinance is what I point to when I support the BRIC for funding. So that's why I think it's for the one thing that we have to, rest our laurels on, we're not complying with. I think that we could do better. I think that we should be the model. We are the model, but it's our job to make sure we're the model. And so I'm grateful for the work that is done, and I know there's more work to do. I did just want to point, I think one of your examples was about sort of political extremism. I know that in the past few years, even just in my DMs, it's gotten really, really rotten. I know that there's multiple death threats that have had to be investigated for me. I think that I do want to just make sure that every single elected official, whether people agree with them or not, gets the same level of support by the BRIC. So can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, thank you, Councilor. We've gotten calls from many different public officials, and we don't, I mean, it doesn't matter. You support the brick, you don't support the brick. We're going to investigate anything that affects public safety or could harm some individual. We are not biased in that way for who the person is, who the victim is.
And obviously, like around the country, there have been elected officials that have been executed recently. So it's really top of mind for, I know, anyone in this work, just making sure that, I look around at my colleagues and there are times when we don't agree, but I just want to make sure that they get the support that they need, because the reality is that it's not easy for public officials in these times. So I want to switch to rats. I think this is a great idea. Thank you for doing this. I think that sensors are really important. I think that having there be some, I want it to be in my district as well. So I was just curious to see whether and thank you, John Ulrich, for all the work that you do. I have a couple of areas that need to get baited, so I'll talk to you after this hearing. Are we thinking about doing this in other places? And I'm excited to join the public meeting tonight as well.
Yeah, I can start and then hand it over to John. But we're looking to deploy the sensors across the city to track rodent activity. As Administrator Bach said, we want to see the success of this technology at this location before making the determination if we're going to expand it. I would say that the BRAP team is deploying different technologies across the city, including in District 8, and we're working with tree pits, baiting, sewer traps. So I'll let John kind of explain more, but to answer your question, Councilor, we're working on all parts of the city.
And I've been told to ask for forgiveness and not permission on the work I'm doing on the tree pits, so hopefully.
Good afternoon, Councilor. Yes, we are doing stuff in the Back Bay. Not this particular technology yet, but we do have sensors in public alleys and, like Luke said, looking at tree pits in Beacon Hill. We're looking to deploy these new technologies, but also measure them so that we know they're successful. So the things that we find have an impact and decrease rodent activity, we would look to scale them in the future.
And obviously, this is not the hearing we're talking about, but my proposal is to put out trash on the same day. I think the fact that we have, and former Councilor Bach knows this issue all too well, but the issues that we're running into in our downtown neighborhoods with trash on the streets for long periods of time in the Back Bay and Beacon Hill, and especially commercial trash, are like the top issues that my constituents are talking about. So whether we have cameras or sensors or not, I think that making sure that, I think Kenzie once called it a rat buffet that we're offering, so to rats. So I think as much as we can work on this issue in partnership, the better. That means looking at the trash contract. That means so many other things. But thank you so much to the chair for your indulgence, and I'm grateful to all of you for being here.
Awesome. Thank you, Councilor Durkin. Councilor Mejia, I'm going to go back to you. I'm going to give you 4 minutes. I just want to be mindful of our second panel that we have coming on.
Okay, yeah. So thank you for clarifying that we're going to have another opportunity. I guess I was getting confused by the rat situation, and you guys, it just made absolutely no sense, but it's surveillance nonetheless, even though it's rodents. Okay, got it. I'm just curious because I know that the commissioner, and during one of our hearings, said that we were not using any AI tools. And Tango, what is it? What is it? Tangos is an AI generated, or is it powered? Is it AI powered?
Not
that you know of?
Not that I'm aware of, to be honest.
Okay, so can you confirm whether or not Tangos is AI powered?
I can try to confirm that. We are not currently using it, though, I will say.
Are you using any AI powered tools?
Not to my knowledge currently.
What do you mean by that?
I will say I'm not necessarily aware of every single piece of technology used throughout the department, but out of the bricks portfolio, I'm not aware of like specific AI-powered technologies that are in use.
So I guess the reason why I'm just trying to dig in a little bit deeper to that, when you're not aware of, that means that we're not, right? Like, I just need to know that. Like, I need a definite, you are the director of BRIC, right? So I'm going to assume that either we are or we're not, and you could definitely say that with confidence.
So I can say with confidence within the BRICS purview, the technology that we operate, we are not currently.
Great, I appreciate that. That's great. I'm happy to hear that. And I'm just curious, what protections are in place if the cloud environment storing any related data is compromised?
So all the technology applications we utilize, we try to make sure we have a good review of their security architecture, and that it meets different federal standards to make sure that we're compliant with the cybersecurity requirements that are necessary. And were we to be notified of any breaches, we would obviously take immediate action to kind of remedy that or cease our use of that application for sure.
Okay, so advocates have raised some concerns about BRICS participation in the federal task forces. And I'm just curious, what are the bright lines you've set so that civil and immigration or political leads cannot be repackaged as criminal to obtain city data? Describe recent denials to show those lines work in practice.
So I would say that the tools that we're talking about today are not really kind of in that space, but I would say that we have, memorandums of understanding in place with all of our federal task forces, as well as kind of our standard, procedures that we go through with any requester. So just because, we're in a task force environment does not necessarily alleviate those, request-based controls that we have.
This is where I'm having a hard time with showing up for this hearing, prepared to ask questions about surveillance related, but every time I ask a question that I think is pertaining to something that we're discussing, there is keep being redirected. So I think the question that I'm asking, if I can repackage it so that it's social media related. How about that? So I can get some answers here. So as it relates to social media, what if any participation BRIC has with federal task force and things of that nature in terms of data sharing?
So I would say that federal, agencies that we work with don't have any direct access to these tools. They're in use by BRIC personnel directly, not by people in a task force type environment.
But BRIC is the Boston Regional Intelligence Center that gets funding from the federal government to do anti-terrorism and crime work. So help me understand how those two things are different.
So I would say we're fully part of the Boston Police Department under the commissioner's leadership. We do receive some federal grant funding, and we do some. Yep, it's about 20% of our overall budget.
That's a lot.
Then we do have the sort of counterterrorism responsibility for the department, and so through that mechanism, we work with the Joint Terrorism Task Force and have officers assigned there who fall under the BRICS command and control.
So is there information sharing through social media, intelligence gathering that you freely share with federal task force?
I would say pursuant to criminal investigations, yes, there is.
And pursuant to criminal investigations such as?
I would say counterterrorism investigations that we have ongoing.
What about immigration?
Not immigration related.
And gang activity?
Yes.
I know my time is up and I feel like we have another panel and I want to be respectful. I'll just wait until whenever we have a hearing where we can talk more about the other issues that are part of this ordinance.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilor Mejia. And I want to thank our panelists today for being here and answering our questions. I am going to dismiss this first panel. I'm going to ask our second panel, who has been so patient with us, if you could come up. And I know that there's some hard stops, so we'll try to be respectful of that as well. Well, thank you to the administration panel.
Thank you, councilors.
Thank you, Chair.
So now we have, all right, so now we're inviting up Cade Crockford, Director of Technology for Liberty Program with the ACLU of Massachusetts, and we have Julie Bernstein, co-chair of Digital Fourth. I thought you were going to be on Zoom. Yeah, well, I appreciate you being here. That's to see it in my notes here. It's like, look at Zoom, so. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to turn it over. I know that we have like about half an hour before, so want to give it to you for opening statements and remarks, and then we'll turn it over to our council colleagues for questions. Thank you again for being here once again.
Thanks, Chair Santana, and thanks to Councilors Weber and Mejia for sticking around. My name is Cade Crockford. I'm here representing the ACLU of Massachusetts. Thanks for holding this hearing and for sticking it out. I do have to leave at 5:10 sharp. I have another obligation that I have to get to. So I want to say a couple of things. First, a note about process and fidelity to the rule of law. So following comments that Councilors Weber and Durkin made, it is definitely disappointing and concerning to see that the police department has been using the social media surveillance technology without council approval for close to a year. The ordinance is very clear. It's not complicated. The department can't lawfully use surveillance technology that hasn't been previously approved by the council, except in time-limited exigent circumstances. Exigent circumstances, that's a legal concept that the police department should be very familiar with, and it does not mean a permanent state of emergency. It is defined in the ordinance to mean a time-limited, true emergency public safety threat, a specific threat, not vague concerns about, political situations being sort of unwieldy in the country. It's disappointing to see that in this case, the department didn't follow the law, citing these vague, unspecified threats related to the November election. That is not exigency. I don't think any court would see that as exigency that allows the department to, conduct a search without a warrant, for example, and that's how the ordinance defines exigency. So that constitutes a clear violation of the law, and going forward, we hope the department will not make a habit out of violating the law and will instead come to seek council approval prior to the adoption of technology as is required by the ordinance. So that's the first thing. The second thing is just some comments about social media monitoring. Speech can look really bad and not be criminal. I think many of us are familiar with this concept because we live in a world today where the federal government is issuing racist dog whistles from official social media accounts run by federal agencies. Just one example of the kind of disgusting rhetoric that we're seeing coming from the White House and the federal government today, and the MAGA movement more broadly. In recent years, as in part related to these events, many social media platforms have become totally overrun with racist, anti-immigrant, anti-gay, misogynistic content. All of this is distasteful to many of us, myself included, but vanishingly little of it is criminal in nature, right? And in the United States, we care about freedom of speech and association. And there's a real difference between saying something disgusting and nasty to someone and committing a crime. So let's look at a different case, one that maybe is sort of more apt to the conversation that the police department is having related to social media surveillance. And that's about, let's take the phrase from the river to the sea, right? There's been a lot of debate about that. Is that terrorism? Is it expression of material support for terrorism? Some people say yes. Other people say no. That's a clear cry for freedom, right? On behalf of the Palestinian people. Well, that's a real debate. Who decides, right? Who decides what constitutes speech that, pushes against the border and falls over the edge into something that constitutes a threat or a crime? We don't really know. Apparently, maybe Boston police analysts are deciding that. So what's missing from the documents that the BPD provided to the council with respect to these social media monitoring tools is any context about how the BPD itself views these debates. How does the Boston Police Department determine when speech crosses over into criminal activity? How does BPD use these tools to track and monitor political expression when it is not tied to specific criminal acts or suspicion of specific criminal acts? And there's some relevant history here that frankly does not reflect well on the department. Documents obtained by my office about 10 years ago showed that the Boston Police Department was using social media surveillance tools to track Black Lives Matter activity, a student walkout at BPS, and ordinary speech that Muslims were engaging in on social media, using just like regular Islamic terms that had nothing to do with violence or terrorism or criminal activity of any kind. So none of this stuff was connected to criminal activity, but all of this content was being swept up by the BRIC. As far as we know, there haven't been any policy changes that have been put in place at the BRIC since we discovered those things, so those concerns remain. More broadly speaking, the ACLU and many other civil rights organizations, including groups like the Brennan Center for Justice, have long expressed concerns about how social media surveillance can infringe on constitutional rights to speak freely and freely associate. So there's a really good report from the Brennan Center on this very issue that I recommend to anybody who's interested in looking into this more. And they found, quote, the deleterious effect of surveillance on free speech has been well documented in empirical research. One recent study found that awareness or fear of government surveillance of the internet had a substantial chilling effect among both US Muslims and broader US samples of internet users. So in a less academic way, essentially what they're saying is when people know that the government is watching what you're saying online, it changes people's behavior, right? We know that. And that's not good. We don't want to chill people's speech about, political issues or their religious expression or things like that. People should feel free to talk about their religious practice without worrying that the government is going to put them on some watch list because they're a Muslim. There are also racial, religious, and cultural issues at play here. It's not clear whether the analysts reviewing these social media materials have the proper cultural backgrounds that would help them understand language and context. So, there are real concerns about misunderstandings of even slang like AVE, young people talk in a way that is just completely incomprehensible to me. My nephew talks about skibbity toilet. Like, honestly, genuinely, what is that? Young people just use completely different words. I don't know what they mean. So, do we have people either at this site intelligence group, which is I'll get to in a second, or at the BPD who are really steeped in the cultural language practices of even Americans born in Boston, let alone, folks on the other side of the world. I sort of find it hard to believe that that's the case. These cultural issues are obviously present in all areas of our society, but with tools like social media monitoring in the hands of the police, a misunderstanding, a lack of fluency, and the absence of proper context could lead to real harm for someone who's making a joke. It's perceived by the police to be something dangerous. All of a sudden the cops are at their door. So these tools do pose a real threat to our fundamental freedom of expression. On the other hand, though, there's not a lot of evidence that they work. So again, the Brennan Center, the Department of Homeland Security did a bunch of pilot programs looking at social media monitoring. In 2016, for example, they piloted a bunch of social media monitoring programs, others later that year. And in 2017, an Inspector General audit of those programs from the DHS Inspector General found that the department hadn't even tried to measure their effectiveness, essentially rendering them totally useless. So presumably if these programs had been of value to DHS, they would have been able to tell the IG, oh yeah, here, we identified this terrorist, we stopped this plot, but nothing of the sort was available to the Inspector General. So the conclusion I think that you can draw is that they were not useful at all for public safety purposes. So the last thing I want to say about the social media thing is that we have real concerns about the outsourcing of government intelligence operations to a private entity, this site intelligence group, that is not subject to any public oversight or scrutiny. Who are these people? What are the values that they hold? How do these analysts determine what constitutes a threat and what's political speech? Where do they draw the line on a question like from the river to the sea? We have no idea, because this company is not subject to democratic oversight or accountability. That's a really significant problem, particularly when serious constitutional freedoms like speech and association are in the crosshairs. So taking a step back, these conversations that we've had today are about tools, right? They're about, specific technologies that the BPD is using to conduct surveillance of people's internet speech. But the larger issue, and the one that the ACLU would like the council to focus on going forward, is, as we discussed at yesterday's hearing, the city lacks comprehensive civil liberties law to protect speech from improper surveillance, no matter how that surveillance is conducted. So people who are posting about religious or social issues online, they shouldn't have to worry that their posts are going to attract the attention of the police, as long as they're not doing anything illegal. Boston needs to address this issue by implementing clear law and policy to prevent the police from collecting information about people's political and religious speech and association when there is no suspicion of criminal activity. And we are very much looking forward to engaging in conversations with the council and the administration about how to achieve that. So thank you. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Julie Bernstein, Chair Santana, Councilors Weber, Mejia, and Durkin. Thank you for the privilege of speaking to you today. I represent Digital Fourth, a local civil liberties organization that advocates for our rights under the Fourth Amendment. Digital Fourth is very concerned about invasive searches of social media and chats without a particularized warrant based upon probable cause, because this can lead to false accusations against innocent people and to the retrospective searching of people's communications in order to charge them with anything that might stick. We are also concerned that poring over these databases is a distraction from real threats. As I testified yesterday, we have every reason to fear that surveillance data collected by the Boston Police Department will be accessed by the federal government and state law enforcement agencies outside Massachusetts. It may be used to arrest people coming to Massachusetts, to receive medical care that is legal in our state, to deport immigrants who have not committed any crimes, and even citizens, including government employees or officials in Massachusetts, whose speech or writing is regarded as a threat to our national security or foreign policy goals. Since 9/11, law enforcement agencies surveil social media and electronic communications to identify potential terrorists. There is little evidence to document the efficacy of this surveillance. We do have an example of how online information can be grossly misinterpreted from the trial of Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, who perpetrated the Boston Marathon bombing. During this trial, Tsarnaev's defense attorney, Miriam Conrad, revealed that FBI Special Agent Stephen Kimball mistook a photograph in Tsarnaev's Twitter account for the Muslim holy site of Mecca, when it was in fact a mosque in Chechnya. She showed that Twitter posts that Agent Kimball highlighted as demonstrating Tsarnaev's radicalization were actually lyrics from pop songs and quotes from comedy shows. And in a particularly egregious example, Agent Kimball misidentified a quote as the words of Anwar al-Awlaki, who is a radical Al-Qaeda affiliated cleric, but it was really a quote from the Quran. Online surveillance has led FBI agents to encourage people who either communicated at some point with a terrorist group or posted extremist rhetoric online to take violent action. In June of 2023, 18-year-old Mateo Ventura of Wakefield, Massachusetts, was arrested for knowingly concealing the source of material support or resources that he intended to go to a foreign terrorist organization. But the government's criminal complaint revealed that the terrorist who Mateo was accused of contacting was an undercover FBI agent who, as he interacted with Mateo online, pretended to be an ISIS member. From the time that Mateo was 16 years old, the agent encouraged him to donate to and join ISIS while instructing him to keep their online relationship a secret. While the FBI moved Mateo towards terrorism, its surveillance of social media and chats failed for months to notice that Jack Tercera, who was also in Massachusetts, was leaking Defense Department secrets. Groups that publicly protest have been surveilled by the BRIC in Boston for over a decade and have included Veterans for Peace, Stop the Wars Coalition, Occupy Wall Street, Code Pink, and more recently, Black and Muslim activists. In 2014 and 2015, the BRIC was using Geophidia social media surveillance with the aim of identifying potential Muslim terrorists. They used keywords without context to search the social media database that included ISIS and Caliphate, as well as Arabic words, including Ummah, which means community, along with the hashtag Muslim Lives Matter. Many people who were not terrorists may have discussed ISIS and the caliphate at this time, and flagging of Ummah and Muslim Lives Matter is anti-Muslim. The BPD also flagged Boston City Councilor Tito Jackson for mentioning Ferguson in a 2014 Facebook post about homelessness and poverty. Social media companies were so disturbed by reports from the ACLU of Northern California about the use of geophilia by police departments that they terminated geophilia access to their posts. In October of 2024, the BRIC began using the highly invasive social media and chat analysis tools, SourceFeed and SearchFeed, under exigent circumstances. The police commissioner was supposed to either submit a surveillance impact report or to have asked the City Council for authorization for the continued use of this surveillance tool beyond 30 days. Instead, the Boston Police Department signed contracts for these tools in February of 2025. The City Council was deprived of the ability to consider or enact any guardrails for the technologies which are used to investigate people's personal communications without probable cause, and which sweep in many potentially innocent contacts of the targets. When federal law enforcement agencies access BRICS data, which they can already do through Joint Terrorism Task Force members or on-site DHS officials, individuals could be lured into committing crimes or immediately deported because of speech that is interpreted as a national security threat or a threat to our foreign policy. In 2022, there was a demonstration by the Patriot Front in Boston. Anti-protesters who showed up at the rally alerted the police about the demonstration, yet police failed to prevent an attack on a black man who was filming the event. A recent story about a 13-year-old 8th grade girl who was unjustifiably interrogated, strip-searched, and sent to jail overnight after being flagged by Gaggle, a widely used school surveillance software program, is instructive about how even social media surveillance software that has been in use for years mischaracterizes intent. According to the Mercury News, one school day, the girl's friends teased her about her tanned complexion. They called her Mexican, even though she's not Mexican. Later that day, when a friend asked her what she was planning for Thursday, she wrote, "On Thursday, we kill all the Mexicos." She was immediately apprehended by police. Her mother, who is now suing the school, recognized that the comments were wrong and stupid, but felt that their context showed that they were not a threat. She said, referring to her daughter's arrest, "It made me feel like, is this the America we live in? And it was this stupid, stupid technology that is just going through picking up random words and not looking at context." We would like this committee to thoroughly consider the benefits versus the risks of using invasive social media monitoring tools. We regularly hear bellicose rhetoric, including threats of violence, from elected officials. We must be extremely careful not to classify written threats online as evidence of someone's violent intentions unless they specifically threaten another individual. In our view, it would be a better investment to have police at the ready to show up for demonstrations by known groups that espouse violence than to pay for invasive social media searches in order to identify emerging groups or individuals who may never even show their face in public, let alone engage in violence. At the very least, we would like the Boston Police Department to immediately delete their records of any search results that do not show evidence that a crime was or is going to be committed. And we would like the committee to review each type of software that the BPD is using to share data with federal law enforcement. We have highlighted these in our written report.
Thank you so much. I appreciate both of your testimonies. We're going to go now to our councilor's questions, starting with Councilor Mejia. You have the floor.
Thank you. And I want to be mindful of the hard stop, and I'm so happy that you are here. Sometimes I think hearing from y'all first sets me up for more success to go at the administration, but don't worry. I'll put all my questions, follow-ups later. But I am curious, and I'm not sure if either one of you might be able to help me better understand this, but from your perspective, how would you improve our surveillance ordinance? Like if there was an opportunity to make amendments, I'd love to hear what those are on the record so that we can do that work. And what other policies or procedures do you think the Boston Police Department needs to memorialize? And we heard today about some cases that where social media tools help close a case, and how can we balance the benefits of the tools and civil rights? I think that there's some work that we could do there, and so I'd love to hear you all talk a little bit about that. And I will just say that as an elected official who has utilized my platform and my microphone to really go hard around civil liberties. I know that oftentimes, you just referenced Counselor Jackson, who was also just as rambunctious as I am at times. And I think that sometimes we can become targets, easy targets, right, when we're trying to fight for the people. And I'm just curious kind of like what those protections could look like even for elected officials too. I know for me, I've been really vocal around my BRIC discourse here. And, I might be in somebody's enemy list. And how can we find ourselves with protection even as elected officials?
Oh, Councilor Mejia, that's a lot of questions. Okay, so let me start with the first question. What can we do about the ordinance to improve it? I think there are a couple things that I would do. One would be the language that says the council shall hold a hearing annually to discuss the annual surveillance reports by May 31st. That gives us a general sense of an expectation around when the administration should deliver those reports, but there's actually nothing written in the ordinance that says by X date each year, the administration shall transmit the annual surveillance reports to the city council. I think that's an oversight that we should fix, just to make things crystal clear for everybody, because there's a little confusion right now. So that's one thing I would do. Another thing would be to perhaps add a little more meat to the bone with respect to this exigent circumstances exception. I can tell you, because I was involved in the drafting, the reason that that language is in the ordinance is because we wanted to make sure that if there were a public safety emergency, like, for example, the Boston Marathon bombing, or, even something that doesn't have to do with violence, but involves like a mass catastrophe, like a flood that, results in a building coming down, like what we saw in Miami or something like that. We wouldn't want the surveillance ordinance to stand in the way of the BPD being able to use a technology on the scene of an event that could help them collect evidence that they need, to pursue some sort of investigation or to save lives or something like that. It was not intended, and I don't believe that the language of the ordinance actually allows for this, as I said before, but it certainly was not intended to say, if there are uncertain political dynamics in the country, the BPD can use whatever surveillance technologies it wants without council approval, right? That's not exigent circumstances. So there may be a way that we could clarify that language, but certainly I think the language around the annual surveillance reports could be clearer, just so that there's a very clear deadline by which those need to be transmitted to the council every year. I don't know if you have thoughts.
Yeah, I had a couple of thoughts. One is the process for revoking an existing technology is very arduous. And I think that it needs reform so that there's a simpler way that if a technology is being used and has been used, but there are now serious issues of concern about it. Like, for example, ALPR is now concerned in a whole different realm because we have people coming from out of state to access medical care here, for example. We have immigrants here, which I discussed in yesterday's report, who literally have been, had their cars attacked by ICE after being identified on ALPR. So we need a system not only that could revoke, but also could allow the surveillance ordinance to enable the committee more easily to set up guardrails. If they find, okay, we now have this technology, yeah, you want to use it for certain things like retrieving a child who's been kidnapped, but we don't want it used for certain other things. So I think the surveillance ordinance needs a better way of allowing constraints on technologies that have been approved and of disapproving technologies that seem like they're putting people in serious jeopardy right now. So that's my first thought. My other thought is that there isn't really, I think at this point in time, one of the most important things is that data not be retained unless it's necessary because you're pursuing a criminal. And there's a lot of searching that goes on, whether it's a huge ALPR database full of, non-hits, in other words, vehicles that have not been identified as stolen or participants in a crime. Same thing, when you're searching this social media, there's no way that we know whether these searches disappear and the people that come up with them, if they're not associated with plans to commit a crime or haven't committed a crime. I think the surveillance ordinance needs to have prescriptions about data retention in the case where there is no crime associated with whoever they've identified in these searches. That we need to just purge all of that information. And never mind that, well, they may be planning to do something later, so we need to just hold on to this. I think that's a very dangerous premise in these times, because just like with the gang databases being accessed by ICE to literally round people up without further consideration of how did they land in those gang databases, did they ever commit a crime? The same thing will happen with all of these other databases. They will be used to pinpoint people, and there will be no further examination and due process. And therefore, I think the surveillance ordinance needs to be able to address that.
My time is up, and Kay has to leave, so I yield the rest.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Weber, you have the floor.
Yeah, I think just, assuming exigent circumstances, like as it's defined generally in the courts, and I need to read more cases, but, there's basically, there's a Missouri versus McNeely. The Supreme Court said a variety of circumstances may give rise to an exigency sufficient to justify a warrantless search, including law enforcement's need to provide emergency assistance to an occupant of a home, engage in hot pursuit of a fleeing suspect, or entering a burning building to put out a fire and investigate its cause. So it's like, yeah, we can't go to the court because the house is on fire, or this person is running away, and then you're allowed to not have a warrant to engage in the activity. The idea that we're just creating a years-long exigent circumstance seems bizarre to me. And then if you look at something, getting to what we could revise, they're supposed to report the use of a new technology that they didn't seek approval for within 30 days of the end of the exigent circumstance. But if the exigent circumstance goes on in perpetuity, you would never, so maybe just to report that from the beginning of the exigent circumstance, because then it's 30 days. Obviously, it's not a secret 30 days after or something like that. It might actually, if I'm reading this right. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, that sounds right. Or at least within within 30 days of the beginning of the exigent circumstance.
Yeah, Yeah. So it's if there's people are making general threats and we're going to use this, maybe not just keep it, because under the ordinance, if there's an exigent circumstance, I feel like they never have to report it, except for this. I think they're supposed to ask for an extension if they're not going to do it within. It doesn't say that have that. Or maybe just make that stronger, because if there's going to be this new interpretation.
Sorry, Counselor, just to interrupt. Just to be clear, that interpretation of exigency is not accepted by courts.
Okay.
That's not real.
Yeah, so maybe just as defined by it's assumed here we're talking about what the courts say, what the Supreme Court says it is.
Well, it says as, I forget exactly the language, but it's as courts would accept in situations where you don't have time to get a warrant, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what we're talking. We're talking about actual emergencies that are unfolding immediately right now, right?
Okay.
Not hypothetical problems that may unfold because of, fraught political dynamics in the country.
Yeah, and then I guess the definition ends with, and you can talk a little bit about how this got in there. The use of surveillance technology in exigent circumstances shall not infringe upon an individual's right to peacefully protest or exercise other lawful and protected constitutional rights. So number one is, I guess, do you have anything to say about why that's in there? Number two, do you think using the surveillance technology for anti-Semitic speech, which could be, just something that is pro-Palestinian as opposed to, I mean, I know the definition has become almost meaningless at this point.
Well, hate speech is not criminal.
Yeah.
I mean, there's that, right? We don't even have to argue over the definition of anti-Semitism. I could say a bunch of anti-gay stuff and it's not a crime, right? So, I love gay people, I'm gay, but I'm just saying, you know, I could say that and it wouldn't be a crime.
Yeah, so do you think using these search tools is infringing upon an individual's right to peacefully protest?
I would have to see how they've been using them. I mean, I don't know. You know, that's part of the concern that I raised in my comments is with the site intelligence groups, you know, information collection that BPD is accessing. Those are determinations. What constitutes a threat or domestic violent extremism, which is the phrase that they use, that's up to this privately owned, you know, commercial enterprise that is not subject to any kind of public oversight. So we don't know. I mean, maybe it could be that, you know, peaceful demonstrations against the Israeli military campaign or the blockade in Gaza have been subject to these kinds of, you know, surveillance operations through site intelligence. I don't know. You know, I haven't seen them, so.
Yeah, I would just like to interject a little history here, and the ACLU was at the center of it back in the day. But remember, the KKK has historically had a lot of marches, and they were an overtly violent group. I mean, I would say that they should be designated or could have been designated as a terrorist group, yet we did not. Our courts said, no, we can't stop them from protesting. And what's more, courts decided that they were allowed to protest masked because it wasn't going to, you know, make any, you know, essential change in how they were perceived or anything like that. I mean, they were allowed to continue to protest and protest masked. So when we look at what's happening today, we're rewriting history and we're rewriting what the courts have already decided.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Weber. Councilor Durkin, you have the floor.
You know, I hate to go after Councilor Weber for multiple reasons, but I won't list them here. I just want to thank you both. I think I guess one of the concerns that I have is that I know in March, officials at the U.S. Department of State revealed that they would use AI to revoke the visas of foreign nationals and those to appear to support Hamas and other terror groups known as catch and revoke. I'm just curious if you all have opinions or thoughts about whether, if funded through federal funding, we would have some obligation to share, or if we don't know if this information is being kept over a long period of time, like whether Boston residents could have, you know, if their visas and other immigration status could be impacted by the information that these surveillance tools keep.
I'll just say two very brief things about that. One is that the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, they have their own very extensive social media surveillance operations. So I sort of doubt, although maybe Director Walsh could correct me on this, that they're, you know, asking the Boston Police Department for information about people's social media use. They have their own programs, which we also oppose, and they're very dangerous and problematic. And you know what Marco Rubio is doing at the State Department is really, really frightening, frankly. You know, examining people's social media accounts, even when people are entering the country on tourist visas, you know, to look to see whether they're saying anything negative about Trump. It's really frightening. However, that said, there is a real concern, I think, hanging over all of these conversations, you know, the conversation we had yesterday, the one we're having today, the conversations that we'll have in future months about the UAZ grant and other matters, about the extent to which, you know, the information sharing operations at the BPD could inadvertently, again, you know, I'm looking at the folks from BPD up there. I know that they're not intentionally trying to expose anybody to harm, you know, from this administration, but I think it's inevitable that information could leak, right, if we're not really careful. Just yesterday, I saw a news story about a police officer who was assigned to a DEA task force in another part of the country, a drug task force, who was using his Flock license plate reader account to conduct searches on behalf of a federal agent who wanted to do it for immigration purposes. So, yeah, I mean, there are a million different ways that information could leak out of these systems and end up, harming someone through some sort of federal program. And I think we need to be really alert to all of those and do everything that we can to make sure that Boston's not endangering people in those ways.
And I think for me, I truly think that working in partnership with BPD and the BRIC and all of these things are, and all of, like, sort of the constellation of things that protect Bostonians, and we need the information that we need in order. I do think without intelligence, we can lead to stop and frisk and other, without sort of there being some intelligence. But I think the idea that I don't really understand what source feed, site feed, Tangles, and Chorus actually do and how they collect information, I think that's the conversation that should be happening at the City Council before these programs are unleashed to surveil the public. And it's not that I'm saying that I won't or don't support this. I just think that the timeline of events here it's so important that we actually, when we have an ordinance that is supposed to protect the public from being surveilled without council approval, we have to go through that process. And I know that the ACLU was very involved in the creation of the ordinance. So I'm just curious. I mean, I think I would honestly be I'd be in a better place to support this if I had a commitment that people knew the ordinance and were going to take the steps necessary to make sure that every single time we went through these steps. But I don't know the data retention question. I don't think I heard that answered today. There's so many other questions that I think we need answered. I do think, I guess at least on my end, I assume I'm being videoed and recorded at all times at this point because that's the world we live in. But I think that when new cameras appear in our neighborhoods, I always send out an email blast to that neighborhood saying, hey, you have a new camera where you live, because that is basic. That is the decency that we should give to neighbors when we put a camera in next to their house and where they usually travel. I think this is the same thing. I think that we should be blasting from the rooftops how these programs are being used and the retention policies and how these contracts work and when they're executed, because the reality is that's our duty to the public.
I just wanted to say, I don't know extensively about the programs being used, but what I have understood about them are a couple of salient things. One is the notion that they're being used to look for emerging violent or terrorist groups is disturbing to me, because what it basically means is you're surveying the data without a target that you have any evidence is a criminal group. So that means that you're depending upon, essentially, interpreting language that exists in the social media or the chat space to point a finger at someone. You're starting, this is not how we do law in the United States. We don't start with a threat and look for a possible anybody out there. We start with evidence. And so that's the first disturbing thing. The second disturbing thing is the fact that in order to do this, you have to insinuate yourself into these chat groups, as was explained. You basically have to masquerade as though you're part of that. And I can understand doing that if you have some kind of a credible threat, but doing that just to spy to see if anything is out there should be against the law. I mean, this should not be happening. And it is frightening in the sense that, how many people, say stupid stuff online that they wish they could take back maybe even the next day, that might be, sound violent or sound threatening, but it's not a specific threat. I think there's a lot of them out there. I think we'll find a lot of young people out there and that put them away for no reason, and especially given what the federal government is looking for right now. So I think that, the little I do understand about these programs is frightening to me.
Yeah, and I think even in regards to the folks that have been called by the BRIC because of a threat they've made towards me, they've all been paper tigers. It's all been like, oh, I saw you on Fox News, so I wanted to say that you should die. I mean, that's really, but I do want to say that I am not against AI to, in the respect of, I think there are other cities that are using AI to combat, food poisoning, 48 hours prior to something happening. There are reasons to use AI to surveil sort of social media for good governance. I just think that we need to make sure that we're actually putting the right guardrails on it. And I think the fact that the guardrails have been created and in this instance we're not even backed up, I think that to me says that we have more work to do. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Durkin. I just want to be respectful.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for
I'm
being
sorry, I have to leave. Thanks,
with
Chair.
us today and yesterday.
Thanks very much.
We'll do a second round for my colleagues who may want to. Councilor Mejia, you have the floor.
Well, I don't want to get into the habit of holding people hostage for the sake of holding you here any more time than what you need to be. But I'm just curious about the overreach and how sometimes people utilize tools to create unintended harm to folks or intended targeted harm to people. Can you just, if you don't mind, are there examples that you've seen in other cities or maybe even in Boston where folks have been accused or harmed using these sort of tools?
Well, we've certainly seen a lot of it with the school monitoring tools. There's been a lot of publicity around that. Situations where because, a child mentioned that they were LGBTQ, and that was one of the flag words in these systems because they believed that kids who are LGBTQ may be, at enhanced risk of being bullied, et cetera, then being outed to their parents. I mean, and this is just this is low-level things. Then you have higher-level things where words like kill in the kids' writing were flagged, and it was because they were writing about to kill a mockingbird. And, they get called in, and sometimes even police get notified if they feel like there's a word that's, terribly disturbing. And this happens without the student being first asked, without the presence of their parents or law enforcement, and with their teacher, because a lot of times these are in student essays, for the context. So, this is the danger of these kind of tools, is that you're using very kind of, in non-particular surveillance. Now, granted, if you're inserting yourself in someone's chat and listening every day, you may have much more particular stuff, but still the question remains, what was the basis for doing that? Because it's not within our laws when you don't have a reasonable, probable cause in this case, for you to be doing that. It's a search, and it shouldn't be happening. One thing I didn't, mention again, but I will mention again is to Councilor Durkin's question about access by federal agencies, et cetera. Look, we know that Harvard was basically faced with an ultimatum. One, expose everyone you're admitting to your school to us. Two, give us all of your protest video, and that would contain foreign students on an F-1 visa. And what that means is that there's no way to do that and just say, okay, this is an image of this person at this protest. You're going to be giving them a lot of images from that protest. You're going to be covering a lot of people who are completely within their First Amendment rights. But the government now prioritizes this as anti-Semitic and a national security threat. This isn't something that's been parsed in the courts as to whether this is really fair to call these protests anti-Semitic or a national security threat or anything like that. Yet the data has to be given to the government or they're withdrawing funding. And we're in the same situation with the Boston Police Department. They are getting a lot of federal funding. So this can be held over them at any point to demand any of this data that's being collected through any of these surveillance tools. And, you know, I fear about it because it puts you and them in a very bad position because they need certain tools to really identify real criminals and to help real people. And yet they may be forced to surrender all of this for very, very dangerous purposes.
Right, and I'll just, because I don't know if the beeper went off or not, but this is why I asked earlier about elected officials, and I'm not going to say that I'm concerned for my own safety here, but I am very vocal about my views and and my posture has always been, you know, people first and civil liberties and all that good stuff. And so, you know, there is a dynamic that if you are speaking up or against, you know, you become a target, if you will, right? And I think that that's probably one of the reasons why so many people tend to be afraid. And I think that sometimes we just have to work through our fear and speak up. But I'm just curious, Julie, in your work in the space, like how folks who have been vocal against anything or anyone, how they can end up in some sort of targeted list.
You know, I think that can happen. I mean, I'm testifying at a hearing and saying all kinds of things that are, you know, potentially would be seen as a threat. And for me, at the end of the day, it's a question of like, how do I live with myself? Mm. And I actually, I'll tell you personally how I started to be sensitive to this is, frankly, I was a scientist to begin with. I had to give up my career. I had a profoundly disabled child with a terminal brain condition. And I was home with her for a lot of years, then with another child who was perfect in many ways but developed bipolar disorder. And I saw with her as she was working through trying to survive before we got the diagnosis, which took 6 years of many intelligent people before they made the correct diagnosis because it was something called mixed states and it wasn't commonly identified, how much she was under the gun from people in the administration at school about how she was handling herself. And she didn't really understand how inappropriate she was being, right? Then I had my third one who was non-binary and on the spectrum, and I was constantly getting called into school over statements that they made that the school was concerned about. And my child literally said to me, why do they think I'm like the next school shooter? And all it was about is that here was this person that really didn't understand the lack of tactfulness of their comments, right? And so when I finally got to the point where I could do something with my life, I immediately thought about the criminal justice system, and I thought about, what about all those people whose mothers can't get into school to help them and advocate for them and help people understand that like their intentions were not malign. They just don't get these norms of social conduct. And I you know, because of that, because of the threat that I perceived that so many people experience every day without the recourse to handle it, that's what motivated me to kind of get involved in this space. And so for me, I know I'm putting myself at risk, but I try to think of the fact that I have to live with the fact that I have insights and that I need to make sure that we, as a whole in society, protect people from, the kind of broad surveillance that can pull in a lot of innocent people. And as we saw, and I mean, I'm of Jewish heritage, as we saw, it doesn't take much to round lots of people up, and we're seeing that in real time right now. And it's very frightening. So yes, I mean, many of us are afraid. We try our best to, be private about a lot of things, but we know that if we get out there and testify, we could really be, the targets.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. All right, great. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being our last panelist here today, and really appreciate your insights. Appreciate my colleagues being here. And I have been informed that there's no one signed up for public testimony. I understand that there is going to be an opportunity for people to testify publicly next week virtually, which is that's why there's no one who's signed up here today. But again, I want to thank our panelists today. I want to thank my colleagues. And this hearing on docket number 1356 and docket number 1357 is adjourned. Thank you.